Hello guys, it's Peter from PS Sound, and this is now part 2 of this door enclosure build for an 8-inch kick sub. Sorry for being a bit late bringing this video to you, but I had a slight accident when I was recording the footage when I was building the driver's side. Basically, if you have a GoPro Hero 5, test it before you can really trust it. I basically have an external mic, and for whatever reason, if you turn the camera on with the record button and it comes on automatically and starts recording straight away, it didn't turn the microphone on. And yeah, I was just waving in the air for like, all the 20 videos. So yeah, I didn't really want to deal with that. It would have been just too much work. So I thought, when I do this side, then I can explain everything, and it's not going to be any different than the other side. So let's do it. What's happening here? I have got a crash bar, 1.5-inch crash bar running across the door, which is the most solid fixing point for the enclosure, and there are 3 M5 reeve nuts in it for bolting the enclosure on. Obviously I have to make sure that the glass, which comes down to here, it's not easy to see where it ends, you can just about see that has clearance because the bar is further in. So I figured out on the other side, and this side is the same, that 2 18mm or 3/4 of an inch plywood together gives enough to get a couple of millimeters of clearance, and then once this is bolted on, I can start building the rest of the structure onto this. These 2 pieces now have been glued together and screwed together from the back, so I just use long enough screws they can stick through the wood. If you can see, they just stick out, so when I cut the base plate out, I can just push that on, making sure that I've got clearance all around, and then push it on, and then the screws will mark the base plate from the back. I will know where to screw this piece together with the base plate. I've used countersunk Allen head bolts now because they don't stick out from the surface. They are flush with the surface, so I can put that base plate on. But later on I will use hexa head bolts because these Allen heads can easily fail when you do them up properly. But hexa head holds better, last longer. So yeah, next one is to make the base plate. In order to determine the size of that base plate, I use this taping technique. I tape over the cutout, mark the edge with a Sharpie, and then I just cut it a couple of millimeters further in, so I have easy clearance when I have to put the enclosure into the gap. I have to unfortunately leave that space because where the line is, there's a rod going down for the window mechanism, and I don't want to faff around with that lead to extend that or do something else with it. That would be just way too much hassle. So I make the base plate a little bit smaller there. That way I'm not gonna use that little corner up there, just keep the top of it straight, and then we'll take it up to there later on. But yeah, now I can basically pull this whole piece off, trim it, copy it onto plywood and cut it out. I trimmed now the tape back and copied it over onto the plywood, just to make my life easier. I lost a little bit from it just to keep things straight. It's gonna be easier to build up the whole enclosure on top as well, and all the way down, and then this will be stacked anyway, this part. So yeah, let's cut it out. The base plate is now cut out, and I pressed it onto that mounting piece from what the screws are sticking out from. So if if I take it out, I should be able to see little dots. Ooh, if you can see those little dots around there. So now I know, once I take this out, where to put it on, and screw and glue the pieces together. Then I can drill through the base plate through those holes and mount the whole thing back with proper hexa head bolts, and then I can start building out. Now the plate is glued and screwed together, holes drilled through. So yeah, this is what I can start now building the enclosures from or onto. So now I can bolt it back into the door. I've cut out this bottom plate. Basically I measured from the other side to make it look symmetrical. Plus I also made sure that I had enough clearance from the seat. So I measured it kinda with the door shut inside of the car to make sure the seat can move forward, and also that this bottom plate has enough clearance underneath from the curb. So I, use the spirit level, pull the line all along there, and then there's the level where it sits flush with this, but you need a bit more clearance. So I'm gonna raise from that line a little bit further up, so then I will have enough clearance to shut the door. That bottom plate is also now in place. There was no point really, to show you guys how I made it, because it's just hell of a lot of measuring to measure up where that curve starts to come up, because that will be probably stacked as well, or done as on the other side similarly. And yeah, now I have enough clearance. I have 3mm from the curb, or which is like 1/10 of an inch, just enough. Even with trimming, it will shut nicely, and it doesn't even take up legroom. I wouldn't say that. So yeah, now I can carry on with that plate over there. Then yeah, one by one. Next plate is made in the same way, with the same taping technique. I copy it onto the plywood board, cut it out, and put it in place. So that's been cut out now, nice and flush, and it's in place. So I can carry on to the next one. So yeah, I will have to build up that one, that little gap from wood later. But the next is now this front panel coming to the speaker mounting. This front panel has been cut out now as well. Yeah, it's not really one of those things I can show how I measured it out. Yeah, it's quite a lot of measuring to make sure that everything is at the right place. On the other side, you might have seen pictures before that I kind of split it here, and I made that small piece around the mounting ring from a separate piece just to bring that out. But I just kept it straight. I'm not gonna gain much space with that anyway, and this way it's just easier. I just only have to fill it up at the end and make the shape. So yeah, now I have to bond it in, screw it in, and then after that do the braces between the back panel and this front panel. Yeah, it's pretty much it for the next step. I just quickly want to show you something. Why I really like this PU adhesive. It's basically, even if you don't have a perfect cut, if you don't cut a piece on a circular saw, on a table saw, if you have any small gap, this thing just expands and bonds wood like nothing. My best adhesive, that's for sure. I'm sure you can buy anything similar anywhere, and it sets in half an hour or so. So yeah, it's wicked. So now I'm gonna make the braces between those two panels to make it nice and sturdy. I don't want any vibration on this big flat surface, especially as it's only half an inch plywood. With 3/4 of an inch plywood it would be better, but I would still put in bracing. But with this half inch, it's a must. So yeah, 2 sets of bracing are going in, and then yeah, I made 2 of these braces, and one is placed in, the other one is going to be on the top of that, so they are evenly split between the distance of the baffle. Yeah, I just secure it with a few screws, but once the adhesive does its job, you know, it's going to be rock solid and hold these 2 back and front plates, and then yeah, that's what makes it really solid. So yeah, now I just have to add adhesive, screw it in, and then I can carry on with the puzzle. So now I'm dealing with the top plates of this section. Pretty much the same method, a few screws. You can see the braces inside now, so the air can flow through, and you know, I don't end up with really narrow cavities if I didn't have these holes. So yeah, it's a shame that it cannot be seen. It looks pretty cool. So yeah, this is going in over there. So now the enclosure is back on the door, and that top section has been put on, a brace over there. That little gap in there is now filled up as well, if you can see it. I've just added an extra brace down here as well, so then the mounting ring has solid points to the back plate. So the next is to do the puzzle game here for this section and bring it up to that point of the door card. I really could have just left it straight and it would have been fine, but then I don't know, when I was right at the beginning of cutting the door cards, I thought it would be probably better to gain a little bit more airspace if I took the enclosure up there, but then realistically it just gives so much more hassle and not much more airspace. But well, the door cards had been cut, so yeah, it's a bit more work. So yeah, first I do that top piece, and then after that this front section, which will be a bit trickier than on the other side, because here I still have this enclosure for the front sub box that I'm not going to use, but I can't put the glove box back, because I think when I was making that enclosure, I had to chop a few brackets and bits and bobs away to get space for the enclosure, and I'm not too sure whether I have now time to deal with that, so I may just build this in order to have clearance from the enclosure, and one day I may convert this to, I don't know, some sort of feature in the car. But yeah, it just looks too nice with all these lines in the car. So yeah, back on the enclosure then. So after a few steps, that section is now done. That's brought out, so I can start building onto it to build this shape from as much wood as possible. I used the same PU adhesive between the joints and industrial hot glue to keep these little pieces in place. Once the enclosure comes out, then I can add extra screws into it. Or I'm really at the point right now that even if it costs a fortune, I'm gonna buy a nail gun, because yeah, this is really the point when you realize that it saves hell of a lot of time. You don't have to deal with screws anymore and all that. We will see how that goes. But yeah, now I can carry on and build this section. That section is now pretty good. I had to make this first piece, which is kind of the first one from the inner skin. So that curve goes into the inside of the door, and then this one goes against the door, the inner skin of the door. So now I have to stack this piece all the way till the mounting ring, and then after that I have to do two more smaller ones from the inside of the enclosure till this point. So yeah, once I have all of these tagged, it will make more sense. And again, yeah, it's quite tricky to measure these things up, but I'm using the same tape and marker technique and just make it by hand. And now I'm gonna copy it on the router. Poor flush trim bit has been working a little bit to make this section. It's not screwed and glued in yet to the enclosure, because first I have to mount the enclosure back onto the door, make sure that this has the right angle to the door card and to the contour of the door, and then I can bond the whole piece together. So now, as you see, this is all stacked and glued together. So that's the break where those two layers go into the inside of the door. And in this way I can make it as strong as possible, plus I can also gain a bit more airspace inside. So yeah, now I'm putting this back onto the door, finding the right angle for that, and then bolting the whole piece together. Okay, so the enclosure is back on the door, and I lined it up, and it's a little bit, yeah, I thought that it'd have to be adjusted a little bit, because you might be able to see there's a little bit of slack now on that piece, which was flush before when I was building that part on the bench. So now it's just held in with two screws temporarily until I take it out again, flush trim this back, and then pull the whole enclosure together with that piece from both sides. And I'm very, very lucky, because I was worried about this part, because I didn't remember how far I came down with the enclosure, and fortunately I literally have probably a quarter of an inch gap there from the corner of this enclosure now, because it sticks out quite a lot, probably like 2 inches, but I have just enough there so I don't have to cut this box up. But then yeah, after that I have to make this shape from that corner up to the mounting ring to make it nice and flush. So yeah, step by step. It's looking much better now. So this section that I showed earlier is now glued in, and there was a gap there that I also filled up with that piece of plywood. And if you can see the PA adhesive inside, it's pretty nasty, but it does a great job. It fills all the gaps. So now I just have to do this top section. I've cut this small piece there, so then I can feel that small gap and that gap, and then probably it's time for a bit of fiber filler, a bit of angle grinder with a flap disc just to make a rough shape, and then yeah, we are pretty close to making the final shape. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So that's the inside of the back of the enclosure where I had those braces, as you see. And now I just have to feel this back, and then it's fully done structurally. So yeah, over here I feel that little gap, as well as there. There's a tiny gap there, but I'm gonna fill that up with fiber filler anyway. There's no point to, you know, chase all the last percentage to make everything from wood, but it's still, you know, I bet, you know, 98% wood. You can see what's going on inside there. Adhesive is set. So yeah, so now just this back piece, and it's fully done. I nearly forgot the last bit of this construction. As you see, I'm using the same technique with the tape. So the stacked piece was only till there, but to fill up the desired shape with filler would be crazy amounts, so instead I make one more piece and put a 30-degree on it, so it won't have a sharp edge, and then it's just screwed to the stacked piece, and then I fill this gap, so I will have last filler job at the end. Yeah, obviously I will have to fill this part up, but that's not that major. I can deal with that. Okay, so all the puzzly bits now are also joined together with fiber filler, and I filled all the little gaps that I could see. So there's only one step left before finishing now part 2. You can see I've prepared the mounting ring, protected it from the resin that's gonna pour into the inside of the box. I mix resin with fiberglass powder. You call it what you call it. Many people call it milkshake. Make it nice and hard, so it's not gonna flow easily, but it's just enough so it can flow and it can fill all the gaps inside, which is important because you want the enclosure to be airtight. Otherwise, if you have any leakage, then that can, yeah, screw things up bad time. So yeah, I make the mix, pour it out now inside, and yeah, that's gonna be it. Okay, so here we are. I think now this is the end of part 2, the fabrication part of these enclosures. As you see, the driver's side one is already done, because I'm in UK, before you think, oh hang on a second, that's on the right hand side. And the passenger side has been also finished structurally, and I put it out with the milkshake. Yeah, it filled it everywhere beautifully. So tomorrow morning, the only thing I have to do with this to check whether it's 100% airtight is to fill it up with water, and also then I can tell whether the enclosures are close to each other in terms of volume. I can also run, you know, tests to see how the speaker would perform in it. having said that, yes, I've already tested the driver side one, and yes, I'm definitely happy with it. It's hell of a work. To the end, probably when I finish it, I will have more than 80 hours work in both of these, which is nearly 2 weeks work, but it's definitely worth it, considering how much I spent on, you know, on door builds before and hell knows, crazy stuff on my demo car. This is definitely worth every single minute. So yeah, this is part 2, and in part 3, when I get time, I'm gonna show you guys how I did the contours and the shape of these enclosures, so it looks like you know, a little bit like part of the door card or the door. And then probably part 4 is gonna be when I trim these. So guys, if you like the video, please subscribe if you haven't done so, otherwise you miss the next part. And if you have any questions, really just drop me a line. I'm really interested what you think, guys. It would be great to see more and more videos like this from you too, and from everyone else. Somehow I see many videos when, you know, guys use you know, beautiful templates and they make stacked bits, stacked pods, enclosures and all sorts of things. But I feel like, you know, this is something that you cannot build with templates or whatever smart tools. You really have to get down to it and figure things out step by step. So yeah, cool. Let's see what happens in the next part. Take care.